I broke my #1 intimacy rule with a man who uses a wheelchair, and my best friend mistakenly thought I had a thing for handicapped people. Obviously throwaway, I don't need anyone here seeing my regular account. Also, I'm in the US and English is my first language. Any discrepancies are because I suck at typing on my phone. So, for the, give me the bare bones, I don't have all day to hear this shit. Crew. My top rule since high school has been no S before the third date. I recently broke that rule with a guy who uses a wheelchair, and now my childhood best friend is upset and disgusted, thinking I have some sort of fetish. I'm a 28-year-old woman who has always had a clear stance on relationships and intimacy. My childhood best friend Jess, who is also 28, has known me since we were kids. Over the years we've shared countless secrets and supported each other through thick and thin. To put it simply, I don't think I'm any kind of prude, but I've always been uncomfortable with casual intimacy. It's just not my thing, and it never has been. Jess is well aware of my views on this topic. She's seen me navigate through high school crushes, college flings, and the awkward stages of young adulthood. Despite understanding my stance, Jess has often teased me about it in a lighthearted way. Her jabs were never meant to hurt. They were just part of our dynamic, a way to poke fun at how different we are in some respects. While I've spent most of my 20s focusing on my degree and starting my career, Jess has been in a stable, long-term relationship for the past 3 years. Her boyfriend, whom she met shortly after moving to another state, seems like a great guy. They've built a life together, and although I'm genuinely happy for her, it's also a stark reminder of how different our lives have become. Living in different states has made it challenging for Jess and me to maintain the closeness we once had. We used to spend nearly every weekend together, but now our interactions are mostly limited to occasional phone calls and social media updates. Despite the physical distance, I've always felt that our bond was unbreakable. Recently, however, I've started to feel the strain of our separate lives more acutely. While Jess has been busy with her relationship and new experiences in a different state, I've been navigating the often lonely path of being single. My focus has been on building my career and achieving my personal goals, which has been fulfilling but also isolating at times. About a month ago, I went on a first date with a guy I'd been talking to online for a while. We had exchanged messages, shared a few laughs, and I genuinely thought things might be heading in a positive direction. We finally decided to meet up in person, and I was cautiously optimistic. However, once we were face to face, things felt off. There was an unexplainable weird vibe that I just couldn't shake. His conversation felt forced, his jokes fell flat, and there was an underlying discomfort that made me feel uneasy. After about an hour of strained small talk and awkward silences, I decided to cut the date short. I made a polite excuse and left, feeling a bit disappointed but also relieved to be out of that situation. On my way home, I decided I needed to unwind and shake off the awkwardness of the evening. I remembered a local pub that I used to frequent, a cozy spot where I could just relax and people watch. It was a Friday night, so I expected it to be busy, but I figured it would be worth a shot. When I arrived, the place was indeed packed. The bar area was crowded with groups of friends and couples enjoying their night out, and there wasn't a single seat available. Determined not to let the night end on a sour note, I grabbed a drink and started looking for a place to sit. Most of the restaurant side of the pub was taken up by a lively birthday party, with balloons, laughter, and the occasional off-key singing. Amidst the bustling crowd, I noticed a small table off to the side. There was only one seat open, and a guy was sitting there, engrossed in a book. He seemed completely absorbed in his reading, oblivious to the noisy celebration around him. I hesitated for a moment, considering my options. I'm a social person by nature, and the idea of sitting alone didn't appeal to me. Taking a deep breath, I decided to go for it. What's the worst that could happen? He might say no, and I'd have to keep looking. No big deal. I approached the table with a friendly smile, and asked if I could sit there for a bit, promising that he wouldn't even have to talk to me if he didn't want to. To my surprise, he looked up from his book with an enthusiastic smile and said, "Sure." As I settled into the seat, I got a better look at him. Up close, he was strikingly handsome, the kind of guy who seemed effortlessly attractive. I felt a flutter of nerves but quickly pushed it aside. I sipped my drink in silence, feeling a bit self-conscious but also intrigued by my unexpected company. After a few minutes, he glanced up from his book and said, "I don't mind talking, if you want to." His voice was warm and inviting, and I couldn't help but feel a bit relieved. We started chatting, and it turned out his name was Mike. He was 29, had just finished his master's degree in computer learning, and was living on his own for the first time. He explained that he often came to the pub after work because he lived nearby and wasn't used to the quiet of his new place after growing up with a large family, half-dozen siblings. We talked for a good 2 hours, diving deep into various topics, and finding common ground on almost everything. From our views on dating to our favorite hobbies and tastes, it felt like we had a near total eclipse of a Venn diagram on this stuff. Our conversation was effortless and engaging, a rare connection that seemed to spark from the very beginning. Mike shared that he had basically given up on dating, which I found surprising given how well we were getting along. I couldn't help but blurt out, "I don't know why you'd give up on dating. This is the closest thing I've had to a good date in forever." It was my way of shooting my shot, albeit indirectly, but it felt right in the moment. He gave me a kind of odd look, one that I couldn't quite decipher. Then he said, "Tell you what, I have to go to the bathroom, but when I come back, I'll ask you out for real." It struck me as a bit weird, but I nodded, curious about what would happen next. As he moved to leave, it all clicked. Instead of standing up to walk away, he rolled back in his wheelchair. It hit me then that he wanted to give me a chance to back out without making things awkward. The realization made my heart swell. How considerate and thoughtful could this guy be? When he returned and saw that I was still there, his face broke into a wide, delighted grin. It was the kind of smile that could light up a room, and I felt a rush of warmth. I was so eager to reassure him that I practically tripped over my words, saying something along the lines of, "So, I'm free all weekend. What did you have in mind?" His grin grew even wider, and we began planning our next date right then and there. Another hour later, we found ourselves making plans for Saturday. Our conversation had flowed so smoothly, and the connection between us was undeniable. At some point, Mike opened up about his condition, explaining that he has a neuromuscular disorder. He mentioned the name of the disorder, but it was a bit too technical for me to remember accurately. My degree isn't in STEM after all. Essentially, his legs work, but the signals from his brain get misinterpreted, causing a lack of balance and coordination that prevents him from walking or standing. As we continued talking, the atmosphere in the pub began to shift. The younger, rowdier crowd started to take over, and the noise level increased significantly. It was getting harder to hear each other over the music and chatter, and the intimate vibe of our conversation was being drowned out. Noticing this, Mike leaned in and asked, "Would you like to go back to my place for coffee and continue our conversation there?" His tone was casual, but there was an underlying sincerity that made me feel completely at ease. The idea of spending more time with him was incredibly appealing, especially away from the growing chaos of the pub. I agreed, and we made our way to his place. As you've likely guessed by now, our coffee and conversation didn't happen until the next morning, and I have absolutely no regrets about it. We've been dating ever since, and although it's still early days, I genuinely feel like he could be the one. Onward to yesterday afternoon, my friend Jess, remember Jess, was in town, and we decided to meet up for coffee to catch up. It had been a while since we'd seen each other, and I was excited to share everything that had been happening in my life, especially my blossoming relationship with Mike. We picked a cozy little cafe, the kind of place we used to frequent together, and settled in with our drinks. As we started chatting, I couldn't help but gush about Mike. I told Jess about how we met, our amazing connection, and how happy I had been since we started dating. I was expecting her to share in my excitement, but as I recounted the story, I noticed her demeanor changing. She became quiet, her expression shifting from interest to something more guarded and tense. When I got to the part about breaking my long-standing rule of no S before the third date, Jess's reaction turned outright weird and edgy. I don't remember her exact words, but she essentially accused me of having a fetish for handicapped people. She implied that the only reason I found my relationship with Mike so fulfilling was because he uses a wheelchair, not because of who he is as a person or the effort he puts into our relationship. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. "It's like you're only happy because he's in a wheelchair," she said, her tone dripping with judgment. "Not because he's actually good for you or puts in effort in bed." I was stunned. Jess had always known me as someone who values deep, genuine connections, and her insinuation felt like a betrayal. She continued, saying that I had changed as a person, and before I could even process what she was saying, she got up and left without saying goodbye. 15 years of friendship, and I had never seen her like that. I sat there for a few moments, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her reaction was completely unexpected and hurtful. It wasn't just about her disapproval of my relationship with Mike. It felt like a personal attack on my character and values. I had always thought that Jess understood and supported me, and her sudden outburst left me feeling isolated and misunderstood. As I replayed the conversation in my head, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. I was hurt by her words, confused by her reaction, and worried about what this meant for our friendship. Jess's reaction seemed to come out of nowhere, and I couldn't understand why she would think so negatively about my relationship with Mike. It was clear that something deeper was bothering her, but at that moment, I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that my best friend had walked out on me without even saying goodbye. 15 years of friendship and I've never seen her like that. Update. My first ever update. Yay. So I do have an update on Jess, and shit finally makes perfect sense. And I have a slightly NSFW but funny story about Mike, because this guy is just the best, y'all. After a restless night of turning over the conversation with Jess in my mind, I knew I had to address the situation. I couldn't let 15 years of friendship dissolve without at least trying to understand what had caused her to lash out so harshly. So, I finally mustered the courage to message her yesterday. "I'm still hurt by what you said," I began. "But after 15 years of friendship, I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least ask why you snapped at me like that." To my surprise, Jess replied almost immediately. Her response was filled with regret and an urgency that I hadn't expected. "I'm so sorry," she wrote. "I didn't mean any of that. Can we have a do-over on lunch?" Despite my lingering hurt, I agreed to meet her cautiously. We arranged to meet at a cafe we both loved, a place that held many fond memories from our shared past. The next day, I arrived a bit early, nerves jangling as I waited for Jess to show up. I kept replaying our last conversation in my mind, bracing myself for what she might say. When she finally walked in, she looked just as anxious as I felt. We exchanged awkward smiles and a brief hug before sitting down. Jess was the first to speak, her voice shaky but earnest. "I really am sorry about the other day," she began. "I was completely out of line, and I need to explain what's been going on with me." Let us pause for a moment. Turns out that those of you who said she was jealous, and that she might struggle with something, and especially the person who said something might be going on in her relationship. That's right there. Yeah. All hit a bullseye. Jess revealed that she was in town because she was job hunting. She needed to move back in with her parents for a while, a temporary but necessary step since her relationship had ended. As she began to open up about the breakup, the weight of her recent struggles became evident. Her relationship, which had once seemed so promising, had been slowly deteriorating due to a myriad of small issues that had gradually piled up. But the biggest issue, the one that ultimately broke the relationship, was their intimate life. Jess explained that her boyfriend had never been particularly attentive or skilled in that area, but recently, things had gotten significantly worse. She described how he made no effort whatsoever to ensure that she enjoyed their intimate moments. What was once an occasional disappointment had turned into a constant source of frustration and sadness. Instead of feeling close and connected, Jess often felt neglected and unsatisfied. This neglect extended beyond their physical relationship, affecting their emotional bond as well. Despite her growing discontent, Jess tried to address the issue constructively. She approached her boyfriend with honesty, expressing her feelings and suggesting ways they could improve their intimate life. She hoped that open communication could bridge the gap and bring them closer together. However, her attempts to improve their situation were met with resistance and hostility. Her boyfriend reacted defensively, dismissing her suggestions and feelings. He told her that it was emasculating to receive intimate advice from a woman. This response not only hurt Jess but also left her feeling hopeless. How could they work through their issues if he wasn't even willing to listen? The situation continued to escalate. Every time Jess tried to discuss their problems, her boyfriend's defensiveness grew. He started to get angry when she wasn't in the mood, completely ignoring the fact that his lack of effort was the reason behind her reluctance. Instead of understanding and working together to find a solution, he chose to blame her for the growing distance between them. The final straw came when, during yet another heated argument about their intimate life, her boyfriend suggested something that left her feeling deeply hurt and disrespected. He had always had a thing for Asian women, a preference Jess was aware of but had never felt comfortable with. In a misguided attempt to spice things up, he asked her to dress in a kimono and pretend to be Asian. This suggestion, steeped in racist fetishism, was not only offensive but also highlighted just how little he understood or respected her. Jess just couldn't take it anymore. So, Jess had all of this bottled up and was hoping to talk to me and finally be able to put it down. And I missed every hint that she had something big to discuss because I was gushing about Mike. She sat there, trying to get a word in, but I was too wrapped up in my own excitement. To her, it felt like I was just twisting the knife by bragging about how great our sleep together was. I was oblivious, going on and on about how amazing Mike was, how connected we felt, and how perfect everything seemed. She tried to be supportive, but as I kept talking, I could see her patience wearing thin. I didn't understand at the time that my joy was a painful reminder of what she was missing in her own life. Then, she snapped. Somewhere between what I was saying and what she wanted to talk about, some wires got crossed. She blurted out something incredibly dumb, accusing me of having a fetish for handicapped people. It was such a bizarre and hurtful thing to say, completely out of left field. I was stunned, unable to comprehend why she would say something like that. She didn't even wait for my reaction. She just got up and left without saying goodbye. 15 years of friendship, and she walked out on me, leaving me sitting there, bewildered and hurt. It wasn't until later that I started to piece together what had happened. She was mortified and ashamed of her outburst, but also irrationally mad at me. Not because of anything I did intentionally, but because my happiness felt like a slap in the face to her misery. Jess had hoped to talk about her breakup, to finally unload the weight she'd been carrying. Instead, she felt overshadowed by my excitement and lashed out in a moment of frustration and pain. It was a perfect storm of miscommunication and unmet needs, and it left both of us feeling isolated and misunderstood. One thing to know about Jess is that she's a terrible liar. Back in high school, we jokingly called ourselves the co-founders of the Foot and Mouth Society. Because of this, I believed her sincerity. I told her that I forgave her and apologized for not realizing she needed to discuss something important. She reassured me, saying I was too ridiculously nice and had nothing to apologize for, so I think we'll be okay. For now, I'm not ready for her and Mike to meet because I don't want to make things more awkward, and she agrees with that. But she's genuinely happy for me. Hopefully this will just be a funny story we can laugh about someday. So, on to how Mike almost killed me, lol. Last night we were talking about the Reddit post, and he gets this funny expression that I'm starting to recognize. It's the one where he's about to say something that's going to either make me laugh uncontrollably or leave me completely speechless. He leans in with a mischievous grin and goes, "How do we know you don't have a fetish if we haven't at least tried it in the chair?" I'm sitting there, staring at him in disbelief, and I can't help but laugh. "Are you serious, lol?" I ask, half expecting him to say he's joking. But he's not. Mike nods earnestly and says he's never attempted it before because, cue tears, he's never felt so comfortable with a partner before. My heart melts a little, and I'm also kind of excited by the idea. "Well," he says, still grinning, "why not give it a try?" And that's how we found ourselves in this ridiculous yet endearing situation. His wheelchair has what is essentially a parking brake, which, as it turns out, is broken. Apparently getting it fixed is a major hassle and pretty expensive, so he hasn't prioritized it. Now picture this. We're trying to get the motion of the ocean going, but with every push, the chair rolls backward. It's like some weird awkward dance, and instead of making progress, we're inching our way across the floor. We're both laughing so hard at the absurdity of it all, which only makes it more difficult to keep our balance and focus. At one point, Mike just stops and, through his laughter, says, "Maybe we need those wooden block things they use to keep small planes from rolling away. You know, like in Indiana Jones?" I lose it completely. I'm laughing so hard I can barely breathe, tears streaming down my face, and he's giggling right along with me. Finally, after what feels like an eternity of giggles and futile attempts, I manage to calm down a bit. I take a few deep breaths, trying to regain my composure, and look at him. With the straightest face he can muster, Mike says, "Golly. This sure is uncomfortable." And that's it. I'm gone. If I had asthma, I would have died right there. I laughed so hard I thought I pulled a rib, making this awful wheezing noise as I tried to catch my breath. Mike's laughing too, rubbing my back and apologizing, saying he couldn't resist. So, yeah, confirmed. No fetish here, just a couple of idiots in love with terrible comedic timing. I have no regrets though. This man is the best thing that's happened to me, and moments like these just make me love him even more. Update. Here's the Met Mike's family update. And it's a doozy, or at least felt like it at the time for a girl who grew up with a small dysfunctional family. So first up, you know what people, at least me, don't think about when dating a guy who's always sitting? Height. It's one of those things that just doesn't cross your mind. I knew Mike was taller than me because when we cuddle, he's taller sitting on the couch, but I never really grasped how tall until this weekend. So, we drive up Friday night after work, actually south and west, lol, but to my brain it's always up, in his vehicle, which is modified to be driven entirely using his hands. Neat, right? He's a really good driver too, which was reassuring. One more green flag in a sea of them. We're chatting, laughing, and I'm getting a little nervous because this is the first time I'm meeting his family. We finally get to the house, and it's huge, you guys. Like, not a mansion, but a sprawling one-floor rancher that just keeps going. Real estate was wild back in the day. I'm already feeling a bit small next to this enormous house, and then we get inside. The next thing I know, his mom comes to greet us, and I'm no slouch at 5'7", but she towers over me. She's got this warm, welcoming smile that puts me at ease, but it's impossible to ignore that she's practically a giant. We head into the living room, and I meet his dad, who, funny enough, is the only short one in the family. Then, his youngest sister walks in, holding her 1-year-old daughter, and she's also incredibly tall. It's like stepping into a land of friendly giants. It's late, so after quick introductions and some light conversation, Mike shows me to his old room where we're staying. It's cute and full of nostalgic teenage memorabilia. As we're getting ready for bed, I casually ask, Hey, so, I don't know how this works and stuff, but how tall are you? Mike shrugs and says, I don't know, like a bit over 6'4". Been a while since I checked. A bit over 6'4". Just casually throwing that out there. So, is everyone in your family tall? I ask. He grins and says, kinda. The next morning, I got to meet the rest of Mike's family properly, and let me tell you, it was like being introduced to the Nordic basketball team. Actually, they're Irish, but they're all blonde and tall, so the image fits better. The only one of reasonable height, and still taller than me, was his oldest sister. It was kind of hilarious, honestly. They are also loud. Not in a shouting way, just present. Their voices fill the room, their laughter echoes, and their energy is undeniable. Mike is a lot different around them, but in the cutest way possible. He beams all the time, his happiness radiating off him. You can see how much he loves being home with his family. One of his brothers greeted him by putting him in a headlock and giving him a dang noogie. Mike, of course, elbowed him in the side, and they both ended up laughing. It was all so natural and full of love. Then his mom smacked one of his brothers with a rolled-up magazine for putting his feet on the table, and that set off another round of laughter. The whole scene was a bit intimidating, but in the happiest way imaginable. I'll admit, at first, I felt a little overwhelmed and shut down. This was a lot of energy to take in, and I wasn't used to such a boisterous family. But Mike kept checking in with me, giving me reassuring smiles and gentle touches to make sure I was okay. His family, noticing my initial discomfort, went out of their way to include me in their conversations and jokes, which helped a lot. After a bit, I started to get into the spirit of things. Their warmth and genuine kindness were impossible to resist. We had breakfast together, and it was like a scene out of a movie with everyone talking over each other, passing plates, and sharing stories. The atmosphere was chaotic but in the most welcoming way. As the day went on, I got to see more of this loving chaos in action. Mike's family played a game of basketball in their backyard, and I watched in awe as they moved with a level of coordination and playfulness that only comes from years of sibling rivalry and bonding. I forgot to mention that Mike has a specialized sports wheelchair that he uses specifically for, you guessed it, sports. He and his siblings love playing basketball together, and he is really good at it. Not only does he have an impressive arm, but he's also incredibly fast. And the best part? This wonderful guy I'm in love with will gleefully and deliberately run over someone's toes. He actually aims for it. His siblings have this hilarious reflex of yanking their feet back just in time, and it's absolutely hysterical to watch. Seeing Mike in this environment made me appreciate him even more. He was different here, more relaxed and vibrant, but still the same wonderful person I was falling for. His family's love and acceptance were a big part of who he was, and being welcomed into that was an incredible feeling. So it was this crazy day of loud people playing and having a blast, nieces and nephews running around, and just noise. My ears are still ringing. The food was catered in advance because his mom had 7 babies. All I make on Mother's Day is margaritas. They also have a pool. It's a bit chilly still, but the pool is heated, so we actually all got to swim, which was a lot of fun because I got to show off that I too am athletic. I can do a backwards somersault off a diving board. Yeah. I'm a real catch lol. They at least pretended to be impressed. We all stayed up late, drinking and bitching about how it was too overcast to see the aurora. Boo. The sky had promised a spectacular light show, but the clouds decided to crash the party. Despite the disappointment, we made the best of it, talking and laughing well into the night. By the time I crawled into bed, I was already bracing myself for the inevitable hangover. Sunday morning hit me like a freight train. I had the worst hangover I've had in a while. We slept in a bit late, trying to recover from the previous night's excesses. When we finally dragged ourselves out of bed, we joined Mike's family for the BBQ part of the BBQ weekend. Mike's dad can grill people, and he's fast too. Food was coming off the grill at lightning speed, perfectly cooked and smelling divine. I was amazed at how efficiently he handled everything. I asked Mike about it, and he laughed, saying, "There were 7 of us to feed. Ever see a nest of baby birds?" He had practice. Which, fair enough. Watching his dad in action, I could totally picture a younger version of him, surrounded by hungry kids, grilling up a storm to keep everyone fed. I don't have much experience with babies, but during the BBQ, I got to hold Mike's youngest niece. She's the one living at home with his sister until her husband gets back from deployment. She was such a sweet little bundle of energy, and it was kind of heartwarming to have her in my arms. While I was holding her, Mike and I started talking lightly about kids and the future. I confessed to him that I never really put much thought into having kids. But seeing how happy and close-knit his family is made me reconsider. I told him, if they were going to grow up in a happy home like yours and not how I grew up, I'm pretty sure I'd be open to having them with you someday. I added, but later. I need you all to myself for a while first. Mike's face lit up, and he seemed really happy about that. His joy was contagious, and I felt all warm and fuzzy inside. It made me feel all goofy and happy too. I'm sappy, I know. But honestly, I wouldn't trade these moments for anything. We had to drive home Sunday night, but before we left, Mike's mom pulled me into a big, warm hug. She told me she had never seen her son so happy and thanked me for taking such good care of her baby. It was one of those moments that felt both heartwarming and a bit overwhelming. Then she asked if we'd be back for the 4th of July or if we had plans with my family. I tried to play it cool, but my response was a bit awkward. No, we'll be here if you don't mind. I don't see them much. I think she picked up on the underlying story there because she just hugged the shit out of me. Vikings, all of them, I swear, and told me she couldn't wait to see me again. As she hugged me, I felt this incredible warmth and acceptance. It was as if she understood without me having to explain anything. Her hug was so tight and reassuring, and it made me feel like I was truly part of their family. It was one of those rare moments where you feel completely seen and appreciated for who you are. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about the weekend. Meeting Mike's family had been an eye-opening experience. They were loud, loving, and a bit overwhelming at times, but they were also incredibly supportive and welcoming. It was clear how much they cared for each other, and being included in that circle of love was something special. As we drove through the dark, quiet roads, Mike reached over and held my hand. We didn't need to say much. The connection between us was palpable. The weekend had brought us even closer, and I knew that no matter what the future held, we'd face it together. My ears are still ringing from all the noise and chaos, but it was an absolute blast and I can't wait to see them again in July. Also, pretty much sure Mike is the man I'm going to marry. I literally can't think of a single reason why I would ever let him get away. Anyway. Thanks for reading. Hope you all had a lovely weekend. And those of you who got to see the aurora. I'm happy for you, but you suck. LOL. What do you think about this story? Please share your comments down below. Thank you for listening to Vibe Tales.